What's up, everybody? This is Chris from the Rewired Soul, where we talk about the problem and focus on the solution. It's almost 11 p.m. right now here in Vegas, so I'm doing a live stream. I'm sure a lot of you might be asleep right now, but I was going to record a video, then decided to just do a live stream instead. So if any of you are around, hop on, we can discuss. But I just watched the documentary that I linked a little bit ago on the channel for 7 Days of Heroin, and it's a documentary about the heroin epidemic in the Cincinnati area, Cincinnati, Ohio, but it also talks about Kentucky, which I'm not great at geography, but I think it's pretty close. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my reactions to it, about the documentary, what I saw, what I learned about, and just kind of talk about the state of the heroin epidemic in the United States. So I got my trusty notebook right here. I got some notes, so I will be glancing down to look at these notes and discuss little talking points that I wrote down. So I highly recommend you check it out, first and foremost. I thought it was going to be a little bit different. It seems like, honestly, it seems like there's just so much going on in Cincinnati with the heroin epidemic. Like, you can't cram it all into a 30-minute documentary. Like, they had so many different sections, and each one of them could have been an hour in and of themselves. Like, what would be good is if Netflix did like a docu-series about the epidemic, not just in Cincinnati either, like just all over the place. But yeah, a lot of information. So I'll try to go through this and break it down. I hope it's not too long. But yeah, I'm just going to go over a few points in here. So first off, it's basically what it's called, 7 Days of Heroin. And it documents what's going on in the city of Cincinnati for the most part over 7 days, and learning a lot about the city. So first off, it talks about how every week, on average, every week in Cincinnati, 180 people overdose from heroin, 18 people die. Okay, so in this specific week, that's the statistic, but that's normal for them, okay? And that's a huge issue, and I will touch on that, the fact that it's normal. So one thing I do want to discuss is the fact that, you know, when we look at statistics, all we do is look at the deaths. We don't look at the actual overdoses. Like, look at that number real quick. 180 overdoses, 18 deaths. So the problem is bigger, I think, than a lot of the statistics show us. And I don't, trust me, I'm all about, you know, is the media being malicious and stuff. But it's just something I don't think they're doing maliciously, but we're not talking about that enough. There are, what is that, like 5 or 6 times, no, more than that, more overdoses than there are deaths. So we need to talk about that because that's the larger number. And one of the parts of this is there's a guy, like when they go to the jail later, like one guy's talking about how he's been revived 20 times, like 20 times, like that's nuts. That's crazy. He's been part of that statistic 20 separate times, and that's just one dude. It talks about how on average, in the United States right now, so in our entire country, on average, every 16 minutes, somebody's dying from a heroin overdose or opioid overdose. So, oh, by the way, got my coffee. Stay awake and do this. In the beginning, you know, just kind of talking about what's going on in there. First, they show a church in the community. There's a lot of awesome churches out there, it looks like, that are really trying to help. But man, so many parts of this are just heartbreaking. And it shows a ministry there who has a program for kids, and a lot of the times the kids, their parents are addicts, their aunts and uncles are addicts, like everybody in the house is addicted to heroin. And you're talking about these kids who are 5, 6, 7 years old, just young kids, and they're at this church, and you can just see their struggle, and you know, the church is doing great things for them. Like, one of the beautiful parts about this whole epidemic is that people are going out and helping their communities. Like, that's beautiful. Next, it talks about this homeless camp that's underneath a freeway, and there are cops who go there and they clear out the homeless camp. And what's interesting, and this is a whole different documentary, is one of the cops is talking about how when they used to clear out this homeless camp, it used to be alcoholics and people with mental illnesses that weren't getting properly treated. That is a whole nother video in and of itself. But now a lot of the people living under this bridge are heroin addicts. And, you know, they try to help them, they try to give them resources, they try to, sometimes they arrest them too, just to get them help. And that's a huge deal too. Like, there's a part later on where this young woman is talking about how she purposely got arrested just so she can get treatment. And that right there says a lot about the American healthcare system, because if people are going out and like she didn't do a criminal act aside from getting caught with heroin. I'm not saying like people should go out and rob banks just to get arrested. Like typically it's just like, hey cops, I have heroin on me, like arrest me. And I'll talk a little bit about the program they do there. But like think about the American healthcare system where people are getting arrested just because they can't get treatment. One of the biggest issues in the Cincinnati area or Ohio and Kentucky area right now is that they're dealing with a ton of car accidents as a result of people overdosing. Freeways are getting shut down and all that kind of stuff. So like drunk driving isn't really an issue. They have specific interstates that they talk about where there's a lot of drug deals that go on, you know, areas around there, and they bust people, and these cops, they're talking about all the different places people are hiding their heroin in their shoes and their socks and their cheek and a balloon and all that stuff. And it's brutal too. They show this one kid who gets pulled over and arrested, and they're sitting there talking to him, and he's talking and like he's really lackadaisical about it. And he's talking about how he doesn't really think he has a heroin problem because he snorts it. Like for anybody watching this who's, you know, still dabbling in the substance, like just let you know, like heroin can kill you whether it goes up your nose or in your veins. Like that's the reality of the situation. But that shows you how sick and twisted the disease of addiction makes your brain. It makes you think these things. It's actually a topic that came up in my treatment center today about that lack of fear that people have when they're addicted. They justify it. They're like, oh, well, if I snort it, I won't overdose. That is not true at all. So one of the cool things is, and I'm going to do a whole video about drug court programs, but in Cincinnati, like that young woman who I told you about who got arrested on purpose to get treatment, like, first off, the jails there are flooded with heroin, people using heroin, like just flooded with them. But they have an awesome court program where not even court program, like people are going to jail and getting locked up, and they're participating in evidence-based treatment. That's cool. Very cool. The jail is actually providing evidence-based treatment. For those of you who don't know what that is treatment methods that have been proven by science to help people recover from addiction. Now, here's the other thing. After that, they provide these women, I don't know if they do it in the men's jail, but they provide these women with 2 years of aftercare treatment once they're released. And that's job rehabilitation, additional support, therapy, all that kind of stuff, which is very cool. I'm from here in Las Vegas, and we have a program called West Care, and they do stuff like that, which is awesome. Some of the best care that you get, and you know, even though I work for a privatized treatment center, some of the best care out there comes from these nonprofits. So if you're watching this, find out ways to raise money for these different organizations. We do a lot of that with my program, like my treatment center. We try to raise money for those programs because there's a lot of people out there who don't have insurance. So go to your local Google like different nonprofit organizations and see if you can just do a fundraising event, you know, because unfortunately the government doesn't give them a lot of money. For example, we raised a bunch of money because there are teens who go into this youth program, and we raise money so they can go out on a field trip. We raise money so they can get clothes and food and cigarettes and things like that. So try to check in with your local organizations and see if there's a way that you can help out, because they're doing amazing things, just amazing things. Next, oh man, this part jacked me up. It messed me up. So there's another organization in Cincinnati where they help addicted moms. There is, they opened a whole hospital for children born addicted to heroin. Me personally, I was born addicted to Xanax. I came out of the womb withdrawing. So it's great that there are organizations and hospitals popping up where they're treating these addicted children because they experience withdrawals and they have follow-up appointments and all that. I need coffee before I go into this next part. It shows a young mother who's been clean from heroin, and her baby is just all healthy and good, and the mom is sitting there talking about how, you know, this child gives her something to live for, and you see the mom smiling and just enjoying the time with her daughter, and it's just like, it's awesome. And I'm like, cool, you know. And then the narrator's voice comes on, and she legit says 10 days after this was recorded, the mom relapsed, overdosed, and died. And that hit me hard. And like, this is a reality. And we need to talk about this because one of the issues there, and I'll try to put in a screenshot in the YouTube version of this, there is a sheriff, Sheriff Jones, and he does not allow any of his deputies to carry Narcan. And they are interviewing him, and he's wearing a USA hat, looks like he bought it from the president's website, and he's just talking about how just demonizing these addicts, and then he starts pointing the finger and saying, we're not to blame. I'm not changing my opinion or my views on this heroin epidemic or letting my deputies carry Narcan. This involves state and federal legislation. That's their problem. Like, bruh, like, we're not talking about fixing the roads, okay? We're talking about human beings. We are talking about mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and friends and people of our community. And this guy is just talking to them like just as these inanimate objects. And that's where the issue is. Like, when I talk about how it's become so normal, the heroin epidemic in certain parts of the country, that people stop looking at this as these are human beings. These are people who have families. And the picture that I'll show in the YouTube version of this is of there was a protest to get rid of this sheriff, and then there's counter protests, and there's a sign that says, "Truckers for Jones, police are not doctors, police do not give medicine, heroin addicts can buy their own Narcan." Like, talk about brutal. Like, where is the compassion just for humanity? Like, what kind of people are we if we're just like, let them buy their own Narcan? And, you know, when I started this channel and started doing these videos, like, I saw those comments, and there's so many people out there who are just like, let them die. And it's just crazy because, like I said, these are people's family members and friends, and it's just brutal that some people are just lack that much compassion. Like, it doesn't matter who these people are, like, they are still people. Now, one of the cool things, so on that bad note, let's talk about a good note. A lot of heroin addicts, it's hard for them to get jobs. Even if they get treatment, you think about people getting felonies and it's hard to get jobs. There's a specific company out there, and I did not write the name of this company down, but I'll find it. And they hire heroin addicts. Like, not only do they hire heroin addicts, they hire people in recovery. They hire families of heroin addicts too. And this company, they have specific parts of the workday where they have support groups and meetings, and like, oh my God, like, that is amazing. Like, it's crazy. Like, there's this one mother in there who talking about it. Both of her sons are heroin addicts, and at one of her previous jobs, she overheard, like, one of her coworkers was just talking all that negative stuff about heroin addicts, and this woman, like, had to confront her about it. But now she works at a place where she's in this community where other people have family members who are addicted to heroin, and they ask her about her children. Not only that, there are recovering heroin addicts who work at this company, and that gives her hope that maybe her sons will get better. Like, this company is doing amazing things. Like, that is really cool. Really, really awesome. Then it goes on to show a grandma who is taking care of her daughter's children, well, one of the children, and then her sister is taking care of another one, and because the mother died in January, and that's awesome, that's cool, that's great, I love it. But the grandma starts talking about, because one of the daughter is 9 years old, and she has a lot of questions and resentments, and why me and this, and I wish they would maybe do something where they talked about more information, more resources for children, because that's how the cycle continues. You have these kids who are losing their parents from heroin overdoses, and the kids grow up without a parent, and then because they don't know how to process feelings and deal with certain emotions, they turn to drugs too. And it's this cycle that passes through generations. So we need to start talking about more resources for these children who are affected. Like, if we really want to stop this opioid epidemic, we need to start looking at the children who are affected by this thing. Children who are affected by any time of emotional or mental distress, like, for real, because that's the leading cause of why people turn to drugs in the first place. Lastly, they kind of talk about a mom who loses her son to heroin at the beginning, and then it shows another mom whose son was friends with the gentleman who passed away from a heroin overdose, and he died after having a year clean. And the son's friend ended up going back out too, and his mom is sitting there, and you hear her talking about how she has to imagine, like, what clothes she'll buy her son for his funeral, and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there, and as a parent, like, I'm sitting there like, damn, like, I can't even imagine. Right now, my 8-year-old son is sleeping in the next room, and I'm like, man, I can't imagine that. And it really puts things into perspective. I've been sober 5 years, and I actually got the opportunity to share my story today at one of my treatment centers. And I often reflect on what I put my mom through. Although I didn't overdose, they had her come down to the hospital here in Vegas because they thought I was going to die that night. And, like, man, like, talk about the guilt. But, I keep moving forward, and she's extremely proud of me and happy for me. But yeah, I can't imagine what she was going through, or what any of these other parents are going through, whose children are missing, who they know are addicted to heroin and all that. Like, my final thoughts on 7 Days of Heroin is, unfortunately, it mainly talked about the problem and not the solution. There were some good aspects of it. There were some good people in the community, like that company I told you about, some of the ministries, other church organizations that are helping out. But we need to band together and look at this as a national as well as international problem. And what are we going to do to come together and help fight this thing and give these people the help that they need? Like I said, nobody should have to get arrested to go get the treatment that they need to get well. Like, it's brutal. They didn't talk about in this thing about the people who keep using heroin just to avoid the withdrawal. It didn't talk about methadone clinics. It didn't talk about treatment options. It didn't talk about a lot of stuff, now that I think about it. But that's not really what the purpose of this documentary was, so I'll back up off of it for a minute. But that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here, and that's what I'm going to do. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of videos planned for my YouTube channel, so please go subscribe. I'm going to be talking about drug courts. I'm going to talk about methadone. I'm going to talk about Suboxone. I'm going to talk about different types of rehabs, the good ones, the bad ones, the different levels of care, detox, residential, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization program, which one's best for you. I'm going to talk about getting assessed for addiction, all sorts of stuff. So please stick around, because there's not enough information out there. And I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I do this and I keep pushing forward because nobody else is doing it. So I am trying to make videos to educate people and let people know their options, their resources. Something I'm going to work on this weekend is 3 ways to get treatment without health insurance. Like, how many of you would like something like that? Like, a lot of people would. I have so many people who get in touch with me and they have no insurance, no money, and they think that they're hopeless. And there are resources out there, but nobody knows about it. So if you're watching this, when I make this video about 3 resources you can use without insurance to get help, if you're watching me say this, you need to share this video. Not this video, but the video I make, because we need to let people know the resources that are out there. Those of you, those 3 of you who are watching me right now at 11, 12 at night, I appreciate you watching. But yeah, leave me comments, post, all sorts of stuff. Give me questions. I have a lot of stuff that I want to cover, but I also want to provide content for you. If you're sitting here watching the replay of this on YouTube, make sure you like this video. Like it on Facebook too, but right below, hit that little round subscribe button so you don't miss anything that I'm doing. Also in the description, join my mailing list because I'm going to start letting you all know when videos are coming out. Anyways, that's my recap of 7 Days of Heroin. This is Chris from the Rewired Soul. I'll see you next time.